Yeah. You been on any pods?
I used to have one.
Really? What was it called?
We Need to Talk. I had a podcast for like 4 years.
What?
But before what? Way before. He was doing it, what did you start, 27, 16?
Yeah, it was me and Ryan.
Yeah.
We were doing it back when I was like living in Saga still.
Yeah.
So it was a long time. And then we stopped doing it basically after the first year of the pandemic.
Oh, so we overlapped a little bit then.
Yeah, there was definitely overlap. Yeah, I remember when you guys were doing it.
Why'd you guys stop?
He moved to LA and I was like traveling a lot for work. We were just like, fuck it, we'll just pick that up when we're supposed to pick it back up.
It's called We Need to Talk.
Yeah.
It's a good name.
Yeah, We Need to Talk. It was about like relationship stuff, and it was just hilarious because we were like, you know, what's the 4 words like you never want to hear from your girl? Which is like, we need to talk. You're like, fuck. So we're just like, let's just reframe how that sounds.
Yeah. Did you, when you had your podcast, did you ever feel like you had to did you guys ever hold back anything, or did you kind of talk about whatever? Because
Bro.
and were you like, were you worried about it from like you were younger too? Like, were you worried about your like people hearing anything, your career perspective, anything like that, or you just kind of went with?
So
the flow?
at that time, I actually wasn't worried about career stuff because I was like mainly freelance. But even then, like there's still concerns or things that you should worry about. But what was funny is that different times in the when we were doing the podcast, him and I would be in relationships, and then there were periods of the podcast where we weren't. And like you would see the difference in how we would talk about shit, because we're like, oh, we don't really have to hold back, or it's not that, you know, no one's gonna give a fuck if I like say what I did last night, kind of thing.
Yeah, no one, or you can't.
You don't want to.
You kind of, even if you want to say something to you know the listeners, and you're alluding to something, your like girlfriend might know,
or your
that
ex-girlfriend.
And they might get pissed, so you have to like kind of beat around the bush.
Bro, when we first started,
You don't want to sewer yourself.
when we first started the podcast, like this is years ago, right? When we first started, I wasn't in a relationship, but my partner who I did the podcast with was, and we used to film this at his place, and it was like him and his girl that lived there. And there were a couple episodes where like we would be recording just like this, and she would be like somewhere behind the camera, like basically watching like what we were saying. And then like years later they break up, right? And I remember looking at one day and I was like, bro, like when we were doing that podcast and she was watching, it was the equivalent of like taking a shit and someone staring at you the entire time. I was like, you don't know what to do or like move, so you just kind of like freeze. Because
You don't know if you just like let it rip, or you just kind of squeak it out.
I was like watching him like mentally be like, I can't say certain things, and it became very different.
Yeah.
When we weren't in that situation.
Well, it's gonna be tough because you guys are obviously boys, and like you talk like off air about things.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're on air. It's like, fuck, oh shit, she's watching. What can we say?
Okay, I actually have a funny story about this though. Like, we used to like have people chime in on the Instagram, like send us questions, all this type of shit. And someone had asked, what was like your worst Tinder experience, right? And basically I told this story of how I met this girl off Tinder, and she's like, oh, basically we're like, we'll meet up, we'll go grab a drink or some shit. So we went to I think it was the Joey's at Sherway. And it was like kind of dark. I get there, and immediately I'm like, oh, this girl's not look how she looks like online. Yeah, so I was like, fuck it, I'm already here. Like whatever.
Yeah, have a good night.
Have a good night. Me being of like the guy that I was then, literally, we still end up back at her place, right? Like I was like, fuck it, like I'm here.
I want some drinks.
The thing is, once you have some drinks, she looks like she did online after a couple of drinks, right?
Like,
honestly, I feel like with that pause, I feel like she still
No?
maybe did it.
Look, you're gonna hear what happens. So that's what happened.
God,
bro. So we get back to her place, and this is the thing, right? Like, this girl still follows me to this day on social media. Like, we both see each other.
Oh.
And I will say this. I haven't seen her in person, but she looks very different on social media now than she did back then. Like, she had a huge glow up or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But basically, we end up back at her place, and we, like, start hooking up. And, like, halfway through, I'm like, oh, should I use the bathroom, right? So I go to the bathroom, and do my business. I start washing my hands, and I look in the mirror, and I literally have like makeup foundation all over my face. Like, obviously I'm black, and like this girl is like white, and
I was just gonna ask.
I'm black.
Color foundation.
No, I'm black. This girl was white, and I had like, it's never happened in my life, but it was like the craziest amount on my face. And I remember seeing this.
Did you look? I get it. You never seen? You ever see Tropic Thunder?
Yes.
But the exact
Simple
Jack, like
yes.
the face, like was it like kind of like
it was like blotchy. It was like all over the place.
I'm thinking like Mike Tyson in the like.
Like the cocaine,
the cocaine meme. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Dude, like my nose was fucking cakes. Like everything was all.
Oh my God.
And I remember looking in the mirror.
It's like nose and lips area.
I remember looking in the mirror, and I like immediately sobered up. I was like, this is fucked. And I was like, so I told this story, right? I literally washed my face. I like dried it off. And I just left this girl's crib. Like, I just left. I was
just walked out. What did you say? Like, did she? Like,
no, dude. That's how savage I was back then. I was like, this is fucked. And I literally put my shit on, and I just left. And I didn't talk to this girl. I was like, this is crazy. And I just left, and I couldn't like tell her why it was. I just never saw her again. A year later, right? I like told this exact story on the podcast. A year later, me and my co-host, we're at that old club Ballet, right? And we're in this club just off of Ossington. He's like way on the other side, and I'm like at one end, and he's tall, right? And I can just see him. He's like, yo, like come to me. And I like weave through the crowd, and he's just like, yo, like I want to introduce you to my friend. It's the girl. It's the girl, right? And like, he knows this, so he's like fucking with me, right? Because he knows I couldn't see her in the crowd. So I pull up, and he's like, yo, I want to introduce you to my friend. I see the girl, and I was like, oh. And literally what she says to me, she's like, don't worry, I won't like wear too much makeup next time. And she said that because she had heard me tell the story on the podcast in that year. I didn't mention her name, but that's a prime example of like, you say shit on a podcast and some people like can put two and two together.
Yeah.
And she put two and two together, but she was like funny about it. She was like, I won't wear too much makeup next time. Don't worry about it.
She was chill.
So at least she wasn't pissed. Like, she was a good sport about it. But I will like never forget it. I was just.
Well, it's good you didn't name names too, right? Because you can like if you say it too, then it puts like embarrass someone. At least like, you know, probably sucked. I would guess for her in the moment, and then after the fact as well. You know, kind of like
I think she knew though. Like, I think those are like my two big takeaways from doing the podcast for that long about relationship stuff. Is like, obviously most cases you don't name names, and never fudge your timelines. Like, don't fudge your timelines when you're talking about like, oh, this happened at that time, and like this happened at that time, because people listen and they're just like
they're trying to
catch you at like
wait a
moment.
second here.
And if there's one thing I just learned over the years is that like, if you want to solve a murder or like find out where Bin Laden was hiding at the time, you probably should just hire women because they can find anything and piece anything together.
Bro.
And you know, I have you know, I'll be like, you know, we'll be out for like a dinner with like, you know, my fiance, friend, and just or any female in general ever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, did you know this person was with this person? I'm like, how do you guys figure that out? They're like, oh, we can figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, like people, I don't know what it is, but like they just which is, you know, it's good. It keeps people. It probably keeps, you know, like males in check too, knowing that. But it's crazy how good they are at figuring stuff out. They wait for the inconsistencies, or they can kind of piece stuff together.
Absolutely.
No, and it's the little details. I remember one time a friend of a friend was telling me a story how she found out the guy she was dating was dating this girl. I'm like, well, how'd you know? She's like, well, they're both at the Leaf camp. I'm like, hey, there's 20,000 people at the Leaf camp.
Yeah.
He's like, no, but I know the cuff of his jacket. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, he's got a gold button on his jacket. And she posted a picture. You see the gold button on it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's a fucking jacket. Like, it could be so many different things. Yeah, no. But then I recognized the cutlery at the restaurant after that was his favorite restaurant. Sure enough, or that was his favorite restaurant on her Instagram. Sure enough, she was fucking right.
Yeah.
Like, they just went on that one date. Cause I asked her, I'm like, yo, what'd you go with? And I'm like, what the fuck?
Bro,
like, how did you figure that out?
Sooner or later, like, everything comes to light. Like, as you get older, you realize this shit. Because when I was younger, if I would like fuck around or just like not
find out
or not take things seriously, like shit always like comes up at some point. So as you get older, I feel like you just kind of need to get like scared a little at some point, and you're like, yeah, she will fucking find out. Like, just don't be dumb about it. Especially if you like this person. Like,
sure.
Just don't be dumb.
One of the things, and this come across as like, all altruistic and like, I'm better than anybody or anything. But one of the things that I said when Becca and I started dating, well, I guess even before that, but one of the things I tried to work hard on is just like not lie to her or anybody. Like I try to be very honest. There's times you don't want to offend someone. You're not going to say what you really think. Yeah. But when it comes to like, what did you do? Or I'm by no means will I ever try to lie because often people will either lie to their friends or their partners or whoever to avoid having to have a tough conversation. Yeah. And I realized in life, like, number one, I'm not scared of confrontation. But number two is like, if you start having to do that, especially early on in a relationship, like you're building a weak foundation and like then your word and your character all gets called into question. So I try very, very hard. And honestly, this day, I don't think I've ever, besides having to like tell her where I lied to her where I was going when I was buying the ring, only time. But man, I don't know how people do that. Because at the end of the day too, man, like number one is you're building this like facade and what you're not, what you really aren't. Yeah. And it's not even just that, like, you're going to get caught because, I was making jokes about how women can figure everything out. But karma also gets you, man. Like, karma sees everything. You might go through your whole life. You might go through, like, your 30s and 40s into your 50s and never get caught. But, like, the more you kind of take or
karma will get you in another way.
Everything regresses to the mean in the end. Whether you get caught by someone and they're trying to find inconsistencies in who you are, or it's just, karma catches up to you. But
I will say, I do agree with you, though. I think a lot of these fucking intelligence agencies should be hiring like more women.
I don't understand why aren't they run by women? They can figure anything out. Hop on social media and problems like mysteries solved.
I always said if I ever go missing, hire my ex-girlfriend, tell her I'm with the girl she hated the most, and I will be found instantly. My ex
that actually would.
If somebody, okay, obviously not anymore. But like, when I was dating my ex-girlfriend, if you told her I was with one of the girls that she hated, I'd be found instantly. Yeah, I could be on a different country. I'd be found instantly.
I'm not gonna say the story, but
I
know exactly what you're talking. See, this is the hard part of like, ask your relationship stuff because I could tell a story right now, but it'd be very apparent.
Messy.
So, messy.
But it makes sense though. Like I think. The social media thing is what I just think it's something intrinsically different about men and women in this regard. And I don't mean it in the way that like because women can do it, it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing at all that they have this ability. But like I've yet to meet any of like my close female friends who don't have this like ability to just piece things together, and it's not crazy. You're just like, holy shit, like how did you figure that? How did you see that? And I didn't.
I've yet to find a woman that uses it for good. It's always like, this asshole did fucking this. It's like, just because he was at the same place as someone doesn't mean that like he did something wrong.
Okay, let me ask you, both of you guys, do you think that it's just something that, like, I mean, like, do you think it's women do that because they're just genuinely, they like mysteries and solving stuff because they do like those crime shows and all that, or do you think it's because I think that's common? I'm not generalizing all women, but I know it's like a lot of women that I talk to watch shows, like whether it's someone's aunt or a girl, they like murder mysteries. Yeah. Or do you think it's because women deep down some level, even if they trust like their men or their partner or friends, they still have some deep down like lack of trust. They have suspicion that someone's always doing something wrong.
Oh, I think it's probably like a combination of the two, because I think that's a really good question. I think I do believe intrinsically they just have like an affinity for this. Like they're like, whether or not they've put it to like the test, I feel like you could ask most women, hey, can you just like look into this? And they'll let you know, and it's like
they'll have a report back to you with like answers.
But it's like it's in the same way where it's like depending on like the relationship you have with your girl, usually your girl sees things that like you don't. Like even when it comes to like business stuff, when it comes to like relationships with other people, I've been in situations where my girl literally sees things that I'm like not even.
You're oblivious to.
I'm oblivious to. It's not even like I'm trying to not pay attention to it. It's like she sees things that I don't. So I do think it's an intrinsic thing that comes out in women when they actually care about the guy or girl that they're with.
That's actually a very fair perspective, because Becca's done that for me before. Like I've like some stuff that's come up with like work or whatever. Like it could be anything. Like not stuff that I projects, whatever. She'll always or even meeting new people. Like she always has this like deep feeling. And I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. I think she's also very good, but she sees things that I'm like, I would have never thought that equaled that. And then like later when you start to pay more attention, it's like, oh, that did play out that way, you know?
Exactly.
Which is so interesting. And this is a really small random one about like how they're observant. I got to give a shout out to my sister-in-law, Hannah. My sister sends videos in our family chat of like her baby, of her daughter. And there was a video of her like sleeping in the crib. They're waking her up. It's a very funny video. And Hannah goes, like I watched it all. It's like a minute video. And Hannah like didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Just like, you know, kid talking. Hannah's like, wow, crazy. She sleeps with a calculator. I was like, what? I go back and watch the video. And in the last like 30 seconds, there's like a calculator in her bed next to her that I did not know. And it's a massissive calculator.
This is completely.
It's like that video when the gorilla walks through the screen and it's like no one notices it because you're paying attention to one thing.
Yeah.
But like, I'm like, Hannah, how are you so observant? How did you notice this?
Yeah, but
maybe it's just like, I don't know. They like.
At the same time, I think sometimes, like, I think men do too. Because George, remember when Virgie, my sister-in-law, was pregnant? She told our family at I think it was Mother's Day or something, Mother's Day or Father's Day, one of the days, and she wasn't drinking that day. Obviously, she's pregnant. So we're all having drinks at this whatever brunch. We're at Toroni or something.
I'm gonna tell her from the perspective of like why, how.
Yes, yeah, you tell them. Yeah.
So. This is also like just a weird thing. I always have a feeling when someone's like pregnant. I don't know why. I guessed when Georgia was pregnant before. I wasn't even in the same country as her at the time. I just had like a feeling. I woke up one day. I was in Vegas. So I'm like, I think Georgia's pregnant. I don't know why. And sure enough, she was. Virgie and so they were all for Mother's Day. And I'm on Instagram watching a story. And it's a video of, I guess they're giving a gift to his mom. And the camera's panning on the table. Toroni up at Summerhill, right?
Yeah.
So it's panning on the thing. Now, I'm obviously like, Ricky's my best friend, but I'm also very close with like John and Virgie. We've gone on double dates with them. And like when we go, like, you know, we have a good time. We're fun. We're social people. They're at a brunch. I'm like, oh, they're probably going to be drinking, whatever. I see like a mimosa in front of Rick. I'm like, that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm watching this video go around. And for some reason, I noticed that like John has something in front of him. Ricky's got a drink. And then Virgie has this like tall rock glass, like a tall crystal, whatever. And I'm like, that's interesting. I'm like, everyone's drinking, but I know Toroni makes lemonades, and for some reason that looks like a lemonade. Don't ask me how I figured this out.
Yeah.
And I basically told them, like I think it was Ricky's mom. I was like, hey, I'm gonna tell you something, just so you know that I'm not bullshitting you later. You don't have to tell me, and I don't want to know, but I have a feeling that Virgie's pregnant. Don't say anything. Don't even react. Sure enough, like a couple days later, I guess Elaine like mentioned like, oh, George figured this out. What the hell? And then Virgie like messaged me saying, how the hell did you like realize? How did you figure that out? I was like, honestly, I don't know, and I don't even know how. I just I guess to your point is like, I guess guys can do it too, but I that's also like a one-off. It's not regular. I notice things like that. It might have been a fluke thing.
I think it's maybe when you care about somebody, or you care about the situation. And I guess to bring this back to one too, like if you care about the situation, you're more observant of the little things. Yeah. And I think with women, maybe they care more about the situation with other women. That's why they're more observant of these things. Maybe.
That's a fair point.
I think that's exactly it. I mean,
because even one other thing, I remember, again, this was my ex-girlfriend. We went out one day, and then she's like, oh, I think like those two are like, they're hooking up. I was like, why do you say that? She's like, well, do you notice how they always sat beside each other when we were out? Or they were always like close to each other. I was like, well, like
two people of your friends, like they were hanging out with you? Okay. So
it's like, do you notice how they were like always kind of side by side or something? I'm like, yeah, but like there was a bunch of people, like we're at a table, like where else are you going to go? Yeah. She's like, yeah, but you notice that? I'm like, okay. And then we get in the Uber to go home, and like the person clearly went behind the girl to sit beside her as we get in the Uber. Yeah. It's like, what dude sits in the middle when there's two guys, two girls?
Yeah.
Nobody ever. No guy ever sits in the middle.
Yeah, that is fair.
And then I was like,
it's kind of a dead giveaway.
Yeah, well, that was at the end of the night, right? So we're all splitting up to get in Ubers. So there's like, whatever, like 8 of us or something. Then guy, girl. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah, you know.
Because if a girl gets in the Uber first, I'm going around the far side to get in the other door. So the girl sit in the middle.
Yeah.
That's what most men would do, right?
I think so, yeah.
And I saw it. I was like, okay. I don't know if they ever hooked up or not then, but.
Yeah, it is. What's the game? Oh, there it is.
Messy. Wow.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I do think it's. How do we get on this topic?
Back to your original question: Do you hold back on telling stories because of relationships? I'm like in that middle ground where sometimes I hold back and like, or you leave out key details that would pinpoint the story, like your story, like you're telling. Like you could have left out the makeup and say, "Hey, I went there. Something happened in the bathroom. I had to leave." Yeah. Maybe she wouldn't have figured out it was her, but maybe she had done that with a couple other guys too, and that's how she figured it out.
Yeah, she probably would have figured it out regardless.
Yeah, this fucking dude just left my fucking place.
It is how. Yeah, now I remember how we got in this vein of like asking you if you ever had to like hold back. Obviously, that's one of the downsides too about like because Ricky and I have pretty, I guess, strong opinions about certain things. Not necessarily like not in the sense that like we think we're right about this and we're like only believe this, but like when you see stuff in the media or you know things happen or people we know do something like they're things that I would want to share to express like have a unique perspective on something. That's the point of having a podcast. You should have unique perspective in some capacity. If you're just gonna go on and say the things that everyone always says, like you're just
irrelevant.
Exactly. So it's hard though because of the position we're in. You did it when you were younger. You weren't worried about the career as much. We started this in 2020, the beginning.
Yeah.
Which also we got kind of boned by the pandemic. Like everyone started a podcast when the pandemic hit. But that's the one difficulty because we can talk off air and we talk very candidly. I think we're better at it now on this. Like we'll kind of teeter the line a little bit. Just be careful, but. I also know that I have family that listens, colleagues that listen. I have customers and clients that listen to this too, and and it's cool, but you just never know because you never want to put, at least for myself, like put our family business in a position that someone says, "Oh, George believes this," and the world is today, right? People say that you believe this, so you're that way, which is crazy to me because there's a lot of shit that Ricky believes that I don't agree with, but it doesn't make me think less of him as a person. I'm like,
like I think. Dude, it's come up so much in the last 2 years because of the things like the pandemic and all that. Like even without getting into like what people's beliefs are and shit, it's more like I don't really think people understand that two things can be true. Like at the same time. Like you can
believe
things. Like I can think something is fucked up that just happened or what someone said, but I can also understand why they said it. Like from their perspective, it doesn't make me like think any less of them. It's more about like just trying to understand the nuance in a lot of these conversations. Right?
Well, we had this discussion a while ago. Like you can have two different perspectives that are equally correct almost. And again, there's fact, but we talk about diets and diet fads all the time. You can find peer-reviewed articles that talk about why being vegan is healthy for you. Yeah. You can find a peer-reviewed article or journal or something why being vegan isn't actually healthy for you. Yeah. Or whatever. You guys get what I'm saying. Like there could be two different sides. Both sides might be right, but depending on what you say and how you say it, because how you say it is probably the biggest part, you could get fucking canceled for saying something that could essentially still be true. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Even canceled, just like piled, even like piled on, which is annoying in and of itself. Like people just jump on like you're an idiot, you're this, you're that, whatever.
And that's why even when me and him have like certain episodes we do just us two, we do them once a week. There's certain topics we talk about. I'm like, I would rather talk about this offline with you because we could actually share like our most honest opinions and not judge each other on it. Yeah. Than have it in front of this where people are listening and watching and obviously judging. It depends on how touchy the subject is. We kind of did it a couple weeks ago, talking about FIFA.
Yeah.
Like where it's like you have to pause and say, okay, what can I actually say on air? Yeah.
But what's one of the things though is that, and I don't know who said it, but I think there's a saying like the tell of a strong mind is to be able to hold two consenting beliefs at the same time and like, see the validity in each one. Don't know who said it. I might be making that up, but it's true and it's so interesting. I love this because I do love to talk, and even though I feel like I'm just another guy, I don't have like I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I feel like I can. I feel like when we talk, we have we don't always agree, and also we can talk to different aspects of it. Like we have different perspectives on different things, and it's cool to talk about because you can like you're kind of like you're kind of dissecting your own thoughts and formulating your own opinions as you talk them through. It's just always this fine line of, someone's going to listen and say, well, they said this. And that person, for lack of a better term, doesn't have the same open-mindedness. And then, then you put yourself in a precarious situation. Yeah. I guess going at this point, it's the one downside of having the podcast. But it's also fun because it's cool to be able to talk about it and not be scared to share your perspective on something.
Yeah, I mean, like, here, this is a question for both of you, and I feel like I probably know the answer. But when Ryan and I were doing the podcast, right? Like I said, we did this for just over 4 years. We recorded like once a week. Like we rarely missed a week. And I think, there's all this talk about, like you said, people just regurgitating the same shit, like all these podcasts kind of talking about the same thing. And then you have podcasts like this where like people are like just trying to bring like nuanced opinions and stuff like that. But it's also like healthy to do this. Like, do you not find yourselves like a little like off if you go like a week or two, like not having that time where you just discuss shit for an hour? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it feels very different when you don't have that, because you're like, I just get to talk about things with someone else where I know that, yeah, we might have different opinions, but they're also not gonna like judge me because I'm not coming from like a vindictive or terrible place, right? Yeah. And the challenge is when you're doing this and you have listeners, you almost like, I'm trusting the listener that they know that.
Yeah.
Right? But the unfortunate is there's some people that don't and just assume, right?
The tough part is that when we do this, like, you have that person's undivided attention for an hour or 90 minutes or whatever it is, and you can speak. And I know when I talk to George is fully listening to me, my thoughts, and he's following along on either the story or the thought. Same with our guest. When you're speaking to the audience or the audience is listening, you don't have their full attention for that 90 minutes. A lot of people listen to podcasts as they're driving, as they're at work, when they're working out, whatever it is, going for a walk. So they might hear a bit of one part of that and take it not out of context, but it's like, they might only hear that one section, but like, oh, wow, Ricky's a dick.
Like
or George a fucking piece of shit because he thought that. It's like, well, you didn't hear his full train of thought.
Yeah.
Right? So it's such a tricky. It's just tricky, right? You got to trust the audience that they're going to listen to the whole thing and not judge you based off a soundbite or a clip. And we're nowhere near big enough where people are taking our clips and fucking repurposing them and making us look bad or anything. So it's not something that crosses my mind too much. But again, you think about it.
The good thing, to your point about this, like you do feel off. One of the things I think this has at least benefited myself. I think both of us, but I can speak for myself, is I find myself being more cognizant of what I'm saying. I'm someone who talks a lot and I talk fast.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, because my thoughts, like most people, your thoughts go a mile a minute, and I kind of communicate the way I think, assuming sometimes the person's gonna understand where I'm coming from. And they don't always understand. Could be anything. Could be my opinion about something politically. It could be being in the office. I start sharing ideas because of what I like to do, and people are like, "What are you talking about here? Give me some context." So doing the podcast helped me slow down a little bit, formulate my thoughts, and kind of get a little better at guiding the person through my train of thought. Still don't do it well always. I actually still do it pretty poorly sometimes, but not just that. I'm trying to be better at not saying and like and all these filler words. I still do it often when I'm talking very fast or I get very excited about a point. But that's one of the biggest things. And I guess so. All in all, the biggest thing that this benefits, I think, is making you a better, I don't want to say public speaker, but making you a better communicator. Because I think listening and talk, it's both, right? And even we're sitting here to touch on Ricky's point, we're sitting here to try and understand, just to talk about something and share our perspectives. But because we're friends, we don't have to hold back and be apologetic toward each other. So we're all trying to keep each other accountable for what we come to the table with. So if he comes out here and says, Lionel Messi is, piece of shit, and I heard this about him. Well, hang on a second. Okay, can you explain that more? Where did you hear it from? Are you just coming here because you heard something, or do you have something to bring tangible to the table? So it also helps you kind of slow down. It helps you, knowing that if you're going to put something in the world, you should come correct. Don't just take what you hear and regurgitate it. And I guess the last point, as you said, a lot of people just kind of, again, hear something and say something. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I know people that are, super successful and done well, and other ones that just do it as a hobby. Some have really unique perspectives. Others just say stuff that I could have heard on any other podcast.
Six Buzz.
Right?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And I think that if you're gonna just do this just to say what's been said, you're, I don't know if mouth breather is the right term, but like you're blowing hot air. Like bring some.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a unique perspective today. I don't profess that most of my perspectives are unique. I hear something somewhere, I build off it, I incorporate my principles, and you kind of share it. It's very, very, very hard to have a unique perspective in today's day and age because a lot of people think similarly. But you should try to do a good job of bringing something different to the table than what's been done.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, that's something else. I think I've touched on a few points here, but that's something else that this podcast is. Having a podcast allows you to do is like trying to kind of keep up in the stakes a little bit, if that makes sense.
I agree. I think one of the biggest things for me personally too, and George, you touched on this, is becoming a better listener. Because we have no preset questions, because we have we don't even write down topics 99% of the time, right? Like it's just nothing. It's like sit here, okay, we're gonna talk about this. It's not like if we get a quiet spot or if we have a guest that's not a super chatty person or a storyteller. I don't have a piece of paper. I can be, okay, well, you know what, let's move on to the next point. So what did you think about X, Y, and Z? It's like, okay, I have to make sure I'm listening to every single thing you're saying, because if we hit that quiet spot, what are we going to talk about next? How do we pivot? How do we connect this to the next conversation? And even for me, I love comeback jokes. So we mentioned a joke at the beginning about makeup. Okay, well, down the road, I'm trying to fucking figure out how to put that back in. Again, it's about being a good listener. And just in general, after this podcast started, I became single a little while after. I've noticed in my dating life, this podcast has helped me so much because one, you get unique perspectives and you hear different things through so much, and I become a better storyteller because of it. But the biggest thing is I become a better listener, that when I'm on these dates and I ask these questions, I hear good things and then I can chime in and ask better questions based off the answers I'm given. So I love it.
And one of the big things too, maybe you notice this, when you're younger, maybe not even younger, but if you're not good at, if you're someone who prioritizes more getting your point across, you're not really listening to someone you're talking to them. You're waiting for an opportunity to say, I want to talk again. I want to talk about soccer. If I want to share my whole view on it, we're going to have a dialogue, but everything I say is almost premeditated. It doesn't matter what you say. I'm not countering your point. I'm just continuing my train of thought.
Yeah, you're just waiting to share your shit.
You're waiting for your turn. Yeah.
And doing this, we started with makeup, and now we're talking about how we've the podcast evolves, right? This conversation just gradually takes different steps. So, and that is a skill that a lot of people have it, I think, without doing podcasts, but you develop it a lot, right? Yeah. So you sit with people and then you're genuinely trying to understand them better. And you're genuinely trying to be curious. We've sat on this podcast with people that we sit down with, they're like, man, this person might not, are they going to be what we think? Is it going to be fun? And then they're some of the best guests. Then you give someone the opportunity to let them talk and get their thoughts out, not cut them off to try to get your piece across. You can often be pleasantly surprised that almost everyone out there has something that's unique about them that'd be cool to understand more. And if you listen to what they're saying and what when the passion kind of comes out in their voice, that thing might be what they like. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
but you all bring up super valid points, because for me, I think I agree with everything you guys were saying. I think the big thing about podcasts for me is whenever there's relevant shit happening on social media or things happening in the media, the podcast is the time for me where I can actually talk about my thoughts regarding it in a more nuanced way, as opposed to regurgitating what I'm being told or seeing in the media. It's I'll get to look at something and then say, let's dissect this a bit more, and not necessarily try to you want to understand all perspectives, but even if the situation is not a good situation at all, I'm trying to have a more nuanced conversation about it, because clearly it's you're either on this side of the fence or you're on this side of the fence, and you can't be you have to choose one. And it's why don't we try to have a dialogue about this so that we can understand it as a whole, versus you got to understand my side or it's not it.
I remember seeing a meme once early in the pandemic when that the stat of everyone starting podcast. I was on one of those I don't want to say female meme accounts. I remember Becca sent it to me, and it went, I don't understand why every guy. Or no, sorry. It's 2020 where guys who should go to therapy just start a podcast.
Yeah. I've seen that meme.
You know what I mean?
I've seen that meme, yeah.
That might work. I've never been, and not for any reason. Just I haven't chosen to go to therapy ever. But I don't know if it would yield the same results. I mean, you've Don, you've talked about it. Like, I don't know if it probably for sure it helps you evolve and learn certain things. There's a reason why it's helped so many people. But I from my perspective, it's different. To your point, you're on a platform like this, you're like sitting, trying to understand everything, trying to also understand, am I wrong in what I think here? Which is probably much like there's therapy, but here, if we say something that we think is, or we later find out one of our opinions was like completely wrong or offside, or like not even the realm of reality, correct? We can like circle back and say, oh, you know what, this is actually wrong. My bad. Like, don't really believe this anymore. I've changed my opinion on this. I'm not like this train of thought here is diverging in two different ways, but
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and so do I, because I think it's the idea of just communicating and sharing your thoughts and your opinions, and I say this is a safe space for me because, like, again, you're not here. There's no gotcha moment. It's not like someone's trying to fucking cancel you or trying to get you to say something that's inappropriate or that's going to get you in trouble. It's like, hey, we're here to sit down and share our thoughts. I'm about storytelling. I love hearing fun stories. Like, we started the podcast, you're like, oh, we talk about relationships or Tinder stories, and you come out, oh, I got a great story. I'm like, fuck, my ears perk up for that.
Yeah.
But there's times where it's like we end up getting into deeper conversations that are not as much about storytelling, more about sharing thoughts and opinions. And again, you could do it in a safe space. So it is similar to therapy, where sometimes in therapy, you're there to talk. You're there. It's almost like you're there to vent. And a therapist's job is to ask questions that make you think about things in a different manner or a different light. That's what happens on our podcast a lot of times, because our guests aren't just here to be interviewed. It's a conversation amongst pals, right? Yeah. And I tell everyone, hey, if you want to ask us questions, go ahead. But then just naturally in the conversation, it happens. We'll be talking about music or sports or art or something. And then they'll be like, well, what do you think about that? Or why do you? Like, well, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I've never thought about it. So it just gives you a chance to share your opinions and communicate in a different manner. And that's why I fucking love it.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. I think even
it's a deep conversation.
And I
wasn't expecting this today.
Yeah. Well, see, okay, a lot of this is making me think about stuff that's come up in the media recently, right? And I think when you do a podcast, when you have guests, especially, like, it's not just you and your co-host, you develop media literacy. Like, you start watching stuff and you start saying to yourself, how did that even like end up on TV? Like, not even the content that they're talking about or whatever. It's just like, how did that slip through the cracks of it leading to this mess that you're seeing, right? And when you see guests come on certain shows, and like, you can pinpoint when someone has a guest on their show, and that guest is almost just like a prop to the host. Like, they're not actually trying to engage in a deeper conversation with them. And it's something that I've become like way more aware of since being involved in the field.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was listening to a podcast on the way over here. You ever heard of the All In podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to listen to it quite a bit in the early day, like when it first came out. I kind of pick and choose ones now, because I think they do a good job, but I think like a lot of I don't agree with all of it. Much like any podcast, I get bored after a while. I don't want something new, but they were talking about today, or on the recent episode I was listening, they're talking about how, the stuff with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, and how he's like coming out now trying to get, ahead of it and change kind of his narrative and control it, even though he probably would be advised by lawyers not to. And I think he's made a comment that his lawyers didn't advise him to do this.
Yeah. Did or didn't?
Did not. I think he said, like, the quote was like, what do your lawyers advise that you should be doing this? And he says, they absolutely do not, I think, advise him to do it. Something like that. I read that.
Absolutely do not.
I think I saw that in the Wall Street Journal the other day. But they made a point, and they were getting into this argument. Rarely do I ever agree with Jason Calacanis on that show. For some reason, I do not agree with his opinions, because I don't. He waffles a lot. It doesn't feel like he has a firm opinion on something. But this is the first time I was listening to it, and I'm like, I vehemently agree with what he was saying, and I'll get to the point of where this is going. So they were kind of debating who's at fault for this FTX thing, right? And all of them are kind of piling on Jason, because Jason's saying it's not the media's fault. And they're all saying it's the media's fault. The New York Times, everyone who's like covering this story, are not doing their job to report the facts because they didn't catch it the way Theranos was caught and all these things. And Jason's saying, well, that's not right, because the first person that comes in that door is the venture capitalist who gives them money, and they did no due diligence in this process.
Absolutely.
So They actually called him stupid. Like I think Chamath called him stupid on the show. I'm like, I'm listening to this. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, how is this not obvious? And again, I could be wrong, but why I agree with him in this in his perspective is, so basically he said the VCs are the biggest fault to blame because they all had FOMO, they all poured money in, and they were all, they were worried about missing the opportunity, so they didn't do any due diligence, had no board, had nothing, gave this guy money and trusted him to do the right thing. I agree, they are 100% to blame of why it could have been avoided, because you're trusting someone you're giving them money, like you should be doing due diligence.
Crazy amount.
Sequoia lost $250,000 on their investment, and I will tell you from our startup, $250,000. I think $250 million they put into
$250
million.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
$250K is nothing for these fucks.
So when we were raising capital for our startup, Sequoia to me was the pinnacle, like the 1A. If they invested in us, we were made. It was a long shot, but I always viewed them on this pedestal because they had invested in the biggest and best startups to ever come out of Silicon Valley. Besides guys like John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins, I think he's at, and a few others. There's a guy at Benchmark Capital, I'm forgetting his name now, that are like the pioneers. Sequoia is the best. If they give you the money, you're like, whatever. So when this all comes out and you hear that these people did no due diligence and just threw money at it, that's basically gambling. It's not investing, it's gambling, right? They are 100% to blame. But now to carry over after the fact, to go to the point about media and how this kind of came up, is, okay, once the fraud happens, in order to avoid the fraud, investors need to do a better job and not fund criminal activities if that's what he gets found for. But then after the fact, so once it's discovered that there was fraudulent something happening, from then on, it's the media's job to uncover what happened and report the facts and not sugarcoat shit and just say, this is what happened. They brought up a point about, and if you read the New York Times article, the New York Times interviewed him for like 2 hours and they soundbited it down to 10 minutes and released it all that way. And they're painting him as this guy who's not savvy, not dumb, just a guy who made a human mistake, which is so insane. A guy who stole money.
Yeah. And like disingenuous. Yeah.
Allegedly.
Sorry. The New York Times used to be the pinnacle of news from what I understand. Like it was that was journalism, right? The New York Times you would go to them for the source and the story and the facts. And now it's become this laughing stock. I mean, you see it with Dave Portnoy, a New York Times journalist, try to get him whatever and release an article with no fact checking. So to your point about the media bringing people on as a prop and kind of manipulating stories and angles and all that stuff, for sure we're having a podcast and doing this thing, being in this space, you're more hyper aware of it. But I think even the fact that so many people are starting their own podcasts or their own platforms like a Substack, taking they're the ones doing the investigative reporting, or they're having these conversations that are more nuanced to try and uncover the missing pieces, right? I bring a perspective, you bring one, let's try to formulate our thoughts and all that stuff. I think it is changing a lot, and I don't want to say that, and I don't think that the journalism is going to kind of fade and the traditional media is going to fade away and die. I don't think that's the case, because a lot of people I think rely on it, but I actually think it's becoming a joke. And to circle it back to All In, I'm surprised that they were also shocked. And they talked about it it's crazy. The media's doing this crazy. The media's been a joke for a decade plus. Bro, and I have not relied on traditional media sources for a very long time. I don't go do my own research and press to be some genius, but there's very few things that I read and I'm like, oh, that's probably true for sure. And almost everything I read today, I'm like, could that be false?
Bro, I have a pretty hot take. And it relates to what you're saying right now. So I used to work in public relations. I was my first corporate world that I was in before I went into marketing and film and what I do now. But when you work in these industries, or even if you just have some level of wherewithal, you know that there's checks and balances for things that has to happen, right? And then over time, that shit's changed. Whether it's traditional media or not, media in general, I think, has just got to a point where it's messy. I don't even mean it's bad for someone or good for someone. It's just messy in general. And my hot take is that I look at key things that happen in the years as case studies. And I think this whole shit with Kanye is a prime example of that. And the reason I bring it up is not to say like any of the shit that he's been saying is right or wrong. I think it's like wrong, but the hot take is that in all of this, I think it's like crazy irresponsible of people in media to have him on their platforms.
Yeah.
I think it's like crazy irresponsible. Like, even if, okay, like, let's just forget, okay, like, he's already been saying like all this wild shit, right? And to provide context, like, this is someone that like I listened to for like most of my life, right? One of my first favorite artists. Seen the decline.
I would say it's probably true for a lot of people that listen to hip hop and everything. Like,
right. And this is like
if you circle back, like everyone thought this guy's like a lyrical genius.
I think also like
not even lyrical, creative genius.
I think the fact that he influenced like so many, like, you can't like knock that, but let's just examine what's happened, right? Like steep decline, like over the years, the moment his mom passed, right? Like that's like the key marker. And I only think about these things because I did things. Like for me, like I did therapy. I've like had these types of conversations. So it's easy for me to see like timelines and then think why some things happen, why things don't happen. Now, yeah, I think it's crazy irresponsible to allow someone on your platform to like talk when you know that they've already said wild things. But even before we get to that, how do you, like, being in the media, have someone on your platform that you know is not well mentally?
Yeah, not all there.
It's insane. Like, I know for a fact, like, you two would never in a million years think about having someone on your show that's manic, like just not in the right space mentally.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with, because they might fuck up our show, like they might say something crazy. It's more so because you're good humans, as good as you can be, and say that's actually not good for you. Like, why would I stick a microphone in your face?
Yeah, right? You don't need to, like, you don't want to, not to say enable, I guess enable is what word, and support it. Like, you want someone to go, like, get
but
help.
But that's the thing. It is, you are enabling.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the problem is because of how, I'm trying to think of the word, like, I don't want to say explosive, but how damaging this person is. That's where the blame gets shifted. And I think when I say two things can be true, it's blame can absolutely go to him. But I'm also looking at some of these people crazy for having him on their platform. I'm just like, why? Like, why would you? And I know why they're doing it because I'm not dumb. Like, I know why it's happening. But I'm also just thinking, what's gonna happen years from now when, like, is this a trend that's gonna keep going on? Like, that we're gonna keep seeing? It's kind of
like, to your point. Like you said, it's like a case study and all these things. It's interesting. Like I guess. Yeah, you said it's getting messy, and it seems as if, as an outsider, you know, even though we have this platform where we're kind of technically in media, like, I still don't know the world. Especially like PR, like my sister was in it, you were in it. I don't know that world and the ins and outs. I don't know the media ins and outs, but even just an observer at a high level, knowing nothing, it's messy, and it's like no one is holding, not only holding others accountable, no one's holding themselves accountable.
Yeah,
like the word like integrity and accountability, I think, does not. Frankly, it doesn't exist in like a lot of the media, and it's, I don't know, it's a scary thing too, because, you know, never in my life have I relied on media and news to give me my opinions. Yeah, because I think if you're trusting any source of news, I don't care if it's CNN, Fox, CBC, it doesn't matter what you watch or what you read. Like, you should be able to read stuff and formulate your own opinions. But no one's accountable. So it's like, it seems like everyone just wants to get the flavor of the day and the sound bite and the attention. So then eyeballs go there, they get more. You know, it's sad to say, but everyone's playing the game to get the eyeballs, and you get the eyeballs because that's what you get incentivized for. Yeah. And so Charlie Munger, I always bring this up. Charlie Munger has a famous saying: "Show me the incentives, and I'll show you the outcome." And the incentives are for clickbait sound bites because it's short attention span. The incentive is to raise money to fund your operation. Yeah. So everyone steps in and just perpetuates this problem.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I don't get it. I was going to say I don't get it. I definitely get it. It's just such a shame. It's it's disheartening that it's
shitty.
It's very.
I had so many opinions there, George, and you touched on honestly almost all of them there. The smaller, honestly, George, you touched on all. The only one you miss is that, and I was thinking about this while you're talking, is that, do you know the idea of like all these like serial killers and these terrorists and bomb attacks? Like, the media used to show their faces and names, and now they've started to not, because again, you don't want to give them that publicity. You don't want to give them their 5 minutes of fame or their 30 seconds or whatever.
You're doing something terrible. Don't.
Exactly. Don't. They'll say there was a terrorist attack here. They don't show the pictures. They don't show the name. They don't do it. Some of them still do, because it's like that almost gotcha mentality. But you touched on it. It's like shorter attention spans. Yeah. Okay, we're going to give Kanye an hour long. We don't need that hour. We're going to take that Timbit what's it, Tibbet?
Tibbet, yeah.
Tibbet, where he talks about the bad shit about Jewish people, and we're gonna fucking blast that, and it's gonna boom. Now, next thing you know, like that podcast that was on last week got talked about literally worldwide.
I think the one with Alex Jones.
Yeah,
right?
like he was the first guy to walk off too. Like I think he was one of the first guys to ever walk off the podcast. And it's like that podcast literally is now one of the biggest shows of, I guess, the month or the week or whatever. And it's bad because it's big for the worst possible reason.
Yeah, I just think the whole thing is so messy. And look, you brought up earlier, but I don't think I've ever relied on traditional media or even like other shit to formulate my opinions. Where I know I've got mine is by talking to people who literally don't look like me, don't think like me, because that's how I get informed about shit that goes on. Right? Like, I know I'm very fortunate in the sense that I grew up in like multiple neighborhoods where it was like pretty diverse. I had friends that were very diverse. The fact that like I mentioned before the pod, I've gone to Italy like 3 years in a row, like over the summer. I have friends that like live out in Europe. I went to a wedding out there. It's like, that's an experience I have that I know that a lot of people that look like me don't get to have. But what I'm happy about having that experience is how it's allowed me to think about things in the world and like think about other people's perspectives who don't look anything like me. And it's like, that's where I literally get informed. I don't get informed from shit I see in the media, because I know a lot of the time they're not there to care about those things, right? And I understand the game. That's what it is. I recognize what it is. It just makes me feel so bad when I see people basically, for lack of a better phrase, fall for it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, that's where I feel bad, because I'm like, damn, like you're so passionate about this, and I don't think you understand why you're even passionate about it. Because if you took a couple steps back, like you said earlier, and it's like, well, why is that person shitty? Like, if you ask that question, you might end up leaving it saying, and I'm not saying that to Kanye, I'm just saying, like, you might end up saying, oh, you know what, my opinion wasn't totally right. Or it wasn't, like, so firm as I thought. Now I can kind of see both sides. But I don't think people are, like, really trying to do that as much nowadays.
I feel like even
with people want to fight about everything,
yeah.
Okay?
But
you
even
a very good point there, though.
But and to both your points, we're talking about like the news. Like, we listen to or watch the news or even the media sometimes to get information. The problem is, back in the day, I feel like information was a lot more accurate online or in traditional media, whereas now it
was also more like objective. I'll say quote unquote fact. Like, you can never know if it's fact for sure, but it was like, the car was, there's a, white Bronco driving down the highway. Like, it wasn't like this person.
Here's the video of it,
and they
right?
believe it. It's like, this is the facts. Like, just letting you know what is happening. You know, it wasn't like now the news was less editorial, more reporting. Right? It was a little bit different.
I feel like it was actual journalism, whereas now it's just, you hate to say it too, it's almost like more tabloidy. Where it's like, okay, let's try and get this piece out. We're gonna have to put out so much content now because content is king. We need 20 pieces of content every day to try and capture the attention of our readers. And out of those 20 pieces, we might get 5 good sound bites or 5 good clips that we could use. And you're not actually getting fact anymore. So even when you're watching these things, trying to formulate your own opinion, you might be formulating on a completely inaccurate representation of what actually happened, right? So it's so tough, and that's why I think the saying is believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Yeah. Because it's literally impossible now.
I think at the end of the day, what makes it so difficult is most people, I couldn't think of a percentage, but I think it's really high. A lot of people are fine with just being told things.
Oh, yeah.
Without actually trying to do the work themselves in any form, whatever that looks like. And it's because the work isn't easy. If it was easy, more people would do it. And it's not. Like, it's not easy to have difficult conversations with people, even though for some people, we might not shy away from it. Like, I don't shy away from difficult conversations or uncomfortable ones, but I know that it's not going to be easy still. I still do it because I know the benefit is way better than fucking just acting like, okay, cool. Like, it's not really, I'm not going to fight with you on this. So it's whatever. Like, I don't have to fight with you to have like a constructive conversation either. And that's like the weird thing that I don't think people also don't understand, you know?
The point you said about how people just kind of, they want to be told and they kind of just take it. It's interesting because I'm aware of that, and I think it's a human thing because even I fall victim to it at times.
We all do.
We all do.
And 100%. But I use an example too. Like that's what I mean. Like you can be someone who, tries hard and actively to understand different perspectives, but that's the point. Like it's active. You have to make a concerted effort to do it. It's not just like you're an open-minded person, so you're going to always be open-minded. Everybody kind of has that defense mechanism or that let me get the information and just like, oh, it's easy. It made my life easier. I don't have to fact check that. An example, my brother got me. My brother came to one day. We were talking about our fantasy league. Me and Ricky and Yanni are in one with some buddies. And we're talking about Saquon Barkley or something. Ricky has him on his team. And I was talking about training for him. And my brother says to me, oh, but his last few games weren't that good anyways. He's on like his averages are not great or something. And I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Didn't look into it. Comes in on the podcast, I think, with Ricky or even before one. And I was like, hey, Rick, by the way, like, you keep talking about Saquon being so good. Like, did you know, like, this is, like, I regurgitated it.
Yeah.
And he goes, what are you talking about? This guy's put up, like,
nasty.
I'm like, he's averaging 15 or 16 points a game.
No, like 20 fantasy points. He's like the best. And I was like, and then I'm like, oh, really?
I looked it up,
and I was like, oh, fuck, Yanni got me good here. Like, I took his word for it. And, I trust my brother because he's kind of like me. We're similar in the sense that we're not like experts in a domain, but we're like curious about a lot of things. Yeah. So, Yanni, my family, all call him Wikipedia because he just like, he has a fact for everything.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we trust that he's right and he is right. But then he gets that one time where even maybe he heard something that maybe he got lazy, told me, and like it passed on, right? So, I think that, again, it happens a lot in life. But you just got to be very active and, like, again, don't take everything you
do. Your due diligence.
But, again, sometimes it's tough because sometimes you hear something that you want to hear.
Or you want to believe.
You want to believe, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, Rick doesn't want to trade me Saquon. Saquon fucking sucks anyways.
Oh, always in sports.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you hear something and you're like, well, I don't like this player because of X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, well, I heard that he had 2 off weeks. So it's like, okay, well, what about the rest of the season? Like, sometimes you pick and choose the facts you want to hear and you want to believe, and you put more weight into those because that's what you want, right? Yeah. That's why I personally love Google. And like we even got me and George have talked
confirmation bias.
Like, and it's
Google's
so tough,
free, bro.
right?
Yeah.
Google is one of the best things to ever happen because you've got so much information and it's so accessible so fast. But then on the other side of things, you got to like try and take your biased opinion on something out of it because it happened to me the other day, and I'll tell a full story on this. Sean Oakman, you guys know who that is?
Yeah.
The football player.
So his CFL player, he just he's on the Argos, just won the Grey Cup.
Used to play for Baylor.
He had a really promising career. He was the guy in that picture with he was in this picture where he looks like an absolute fucking animal.
He's wearing, you remember how Ezekiel Elliott wore like
the tank top jersey?
Yeah.
So Oakman did that as well in the Baylor Bears playoff game. He had a big grill mask. He looks terrifying.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So he looks like a monster, right? So he went viral. Everyone said he was going to be like the top pick in the draft. Blah,
Not top.
He was projected top 5 in his sophomore year. Freshman, sophomore, junior. In his junior year, he was projected the following year to go top 5 because he was like MVP of the team.
Yeah.
He had an assault charge or something. I can't remember exactly what charge. Well, it wasn't bad, but it hurt. And then he had an off year. That offseason going into the draft, he got charged with sexual assault. So stock fucking plummeted. Yeah. And then he had an injury. Just a whole bunch of just bad things happened to him. Right? Ended up, I think, kind of getting signed. But again, when something like that happens, it fucks your whole life up. He gets acquitted of it. Turns out he's not guilty. Signs with the CFL. Now he's making his comeback. And you hear this story and I Google it and I only see the side I want to see, which is he was acquitted. This is a good feel good story. Blah blah blah. You don't see you forget the part that, okay, well, in his junior year or whatever, he did do something bad and he was charged for that.
Yeah.
Right? I see this, okay, I want this feel-good story. Like, I'm all about these kind of redemption moments. Blah, blah, okay, he's not guilty in this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, but he still did something bad. So it's kind of like you walk in that fine line where having all this information is good because you get the whole picture. But it's also take the good with the bad, take both sides of the story. Don't be afraid to just listen to both sides because, again, we're humans. It's so tough for us to not find the information that we want to find. Yeah, we want to find this guy did this or this guy didn't do this or this person, whatever. It's so tough. But again, it's just having these conversations where you can see both sides of the story and then formulate your own opinion.
And the biggest thing, at least that for myself that helped, is reading a lot about biases, heuristics, all that stuff. You know who Daniel Kahneman is?
I've heard it, yeah.
Who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yeah.
Okay, if you want a good book, my favorite book about this topic, it's not even about it's not really about the bias and the heuristics that they've invented. It's about the industry as a whole and how Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky kind of became the forefathers of behavioral economics. I think is the subject of the subject matter. It's by Michael Lewis, who wrote The Blind Side, Big Short.
Yeah.
The book's called The Undoing Project. Give it a read. It's cool. It talks about their life, but it also talks about how they start to figure these things out, that humans are irrational. Humans are, like we have biases ingrained in us that we, everyone has it.
Everyone. Yeah.
And I think, honestly, if more people took the time to understand that these things exist in you and you're aware of them, it kind of brings us all full circle, and it just teaches you to be more aware of what you're saying, be more present, be a better listener, communicator, because the problem is, I think a lot of people don't know that we all have faults in us, as human beings, right? We have these things that are just built into our DNA. A lot of people probably know this, but you don't really, if you know where it stems from, like confirmation bias. You said, you hear something, you want to be right, so you believe it. And then when you hear that, then you argue with someone, then you go into Google and say, are McDonald's French fries the best? You're going to find an article that says yes. But if I search the opposite, I'm going to find the opposite.
Exactly.
The problem is, though, is the person who found the article that is on their side is going to put more stock in the fact that, oh no, this is from the Globe and Mail, and yours is only from a tabloid, so it doesn't count. Well, okay, but again, you can probably find a peer-reviewed paper on a lot of things. There are very few things in life that are scientifically, statistically, without a shadow of a doubt, true. Gravity, fucking Einstein's theory of relativity. There's very few that are indisputable.
Change all the time.
And I think that that point, I think just being aware of these things and catching yourself when you do them is the first step in making it just progressing this way of just getting better at these things.
But even with confirmation bias and Google, it's so ingrained in your body, in your mind. It's the way you even type it, what you type into Google.
How you type
we're arguing about McDonald's French fries, and we're talking about, I say they're the best, you say they're not the best. I'm not typing in, are McDonald's French fries the best? I'm typing in, why are McDonald's French fries the best? Because I want, and since me and you, we've but we've had so many debates about random shit. And I try now, over the last probably year, I try and type in an unbiased Google search. So, okay, are McDonald's, I'll literally type in McDonald's French fries, news, top ranked French fries.
Yeah.
Whatever. You try and find things that are.
Who taught you that?
You did. I understand. From all of our arguments,
I know.
Right? Because we'd argue all the time, we'd be like, this is confirmation. I'm like, well, anytime you argue, you're almost using you're almost always using confirmation bias.
Double-edged sword. Now, Ricky, if I do something, he'll be like, "Oh, I think that's confirmation bias, George." And I'm like, and then he'll be like, "No, it's not." I'm like, "No, it's different." I'm like, "No, it's different. It's different. It's not." And he's like, "No, you're doing the same thing." I'm like, "Fucking right." It's a blessing and a curse.
It's so tough trying to objectively look at both sides of the story and making sure that you're doing it properly, because again, we have so much information at our fucking fingertips. But again, that's why we have these conversations, right? To bring us back down to earth. And
I think it starts with I think men get like such a bad rap for it, but
women know how to fucking Google the shit, how to creep the shit out of people, and men know how to Google the shit out of people.
No, but it's like it exists on both sides, but it's your ego. That's all it is. I say men get a bad rap because when you hear the word ego, it's always like the male ego, but women have an ego too. It just shows up very differently. And
fucking it's Instagram searches.
And if you can basically, the hardest thing to do is if you can check your ego and then just say, yo, I don't know what I don't know. Then it allows you to kind of get to this point where you're like, okay, now I can actually look for shit in an unbiased way. But if someone comes to me with an argument and obviously I'm on the opposing side, I might not be at a point where I can honestly say to myself, yo, I have no idea what you're even arguing about from your point of view.
Yeah.
Let me go look that up. Most people won't do that in an argument. Right? It's difficult.
If I had to guess or bet money, I would say that one of the most powerful phrases in the world has to be "I don't know," and I think it's not the most, but it's amongst the most powerful phrases to be able to say that.
Yeah.
And it's probably used the least of anything.
And it's because when we're younger, right? Like, especially, I think about back to being younger, saying things like, I don't know. It was always met with, like, not a positive thing. Like, unless, it wasn't until I got a little bit older where I felt more comfortable saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
When I was younger, if I said I didn't know and it was in like school or like to my parents, I was like, fuck, like I'm gonna get in trouble. Like I should know this. It's like, well, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm only gonna know if I ask questions.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's yeah. And that's another big one, man. It's just ask questions, man. People are scared to, again, the appearance of not knowing either. It's not even just saying I don't know. It's like just like coming across as, oh, this person's dumb. Dude, I'm on this podcast saying dumb shit all the time. Yeah. Half the stuff I was saying earlier, I'm like, wait, did that actually make sense what I said? Like, you don't. Anyways, yeah, the ego's up. Like, the ego gets you good, man.
Yeah, like who you guys are today is very different than who you were. Fucking forget 5 years ago, probably like a year ago. Like people are constantly changing, and I think, I don't know. You guys have probably talked about this, but that whole. It's so weird. It's honestly so weird to think about the pandemic to me, largely because of like how I look at things like case studies and I'm like, bro, how much did that change society in general in terms of like how people think and communicate? I'm less concerned, honestly, about, where you set on these like views and stuff. It's more so, how did this change how people decide to communicate with each other moving forward? Because what I've learned over the years, especially in the last 2, was we talked about how people like to sit firmly on a side, right? And what I've noticed is, imagine you have, I hate using like a political example, but imagine you have someone who's on the left and then you have someone on the right, and you're just sitting in the middle, right? If either person on the left or right decides to just keep walking in their direction, let's say I'm on the right and I keep walking further away and I look back at Ricky, from my point of view, it's going to look like he's closer to the left. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, interesting.
It's going to look that way, even though he hasn't moved. And if you keep walking to the left, and then you look back at Ricky, you're going to be like, what the fuck? Like, you're closer to them. And it's like, he's like, and I haven't even moved. Like, I haven't moved at all. And I've noticed this in conversations and seeing like what's come up in media and all these things. The difficulty is understanding the nuance and stuff, right? Like, I don't think I know people like to portray themselves as being firmly one side or the other in anything, but that's like never true, because everyone always has a moment, whether it comes up in a conversation or quietly to themselves, where they like admit, hey, I think this is different, or I'm on like this other side, and that's okay. But where I've noticed shit has changed is like, you try to even have that nuanced conversation, it takes a lot of the patience. I think my patience has gotten better in like the last 2 years, because I've been like forced to develop it. Yeah. And I'm just like, I wonder how this is going to change things moving forward.
That's actually a very interesting perspective. I never thought about it that way. That's pretty. Yeah, it's a cool. That's a cool take. It's cool to think about it that way.
Because you're correct. Whenever you believe so firmly about one perspective and you keep kind of going in that direction, everybody else, even though their stance hasn't changed, they become more wrong.
If you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
And I've never used that saying. I've always wanted to use that saying.
Politics is the easiest, because it's like, let's use the American politics. You're blue or you're red.
Yeah.
So whether the person on that team, they might be mostly blue and a little bit red or something in their beliefs, because they're blue or because they're red, they're wrong 100% of the time. If you're on the opposing side, right? Yeah. Like, here's a little different because we have 5 different parties. In the States, it's It's either you're blue or you're red, and you believe in that party, not the
There's
person.
a couple of the ones in the States. They're not big,
but
but
like
like a couple.
main
It's not like Canada where
There's
like
a lot more.
the NDP has like 20% of the vote or something, right? Like,
Yeah, I understand. What you're sorry, yes, you're correct.
but it's it is interesting. There you go.
Dude, I've
I haven't said it's interesting at all this episode.
Yeah,
I say it's
You've said
interesting. I did.
Yeah.
Man
I
catches
smile and
it.
look at the camera now.
I say it's interesting, but I say it because I actually genuinely find a lot of.
I
things
know it's funny.
interesting.
You've said Messi a lot of times. Has Messi was dribbling the ball?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I used it as an example twice. I just
it?
didn't. Dad wasn't watching.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone down a rabbit hole, but I wanted to really ask you about your like career now because you've made like I don't say pivot, but like you kind of are pursuing what your persona was, or what I guess not your persona, but like the things that appeared to be hobbies of yours that you enjoyed. You're kind of in that world now from a career perspective. Is that fair to? Or is it a bit different?
Yeah, no, I would say that's like mostly true. I think so. I don't even think I talked to you because I remember when you were doing the vlog way back, right? I basically, I was an athlete most of my life. Then when I was done university,
Wait, sorry, what sport? Football?
I played like everything. I did like football, soccer, track. When I went to university, I played rugby as well.
What school did you go to?
Mac. I went to Mac and then I went to Humber. And I actually don't know if you know the full story, but basically what happened is I graduated from Mac, then I go to Humber to take PR, right? And when I'm at Humber, I'm playing rugby. And I was in this 2-year like PR program. I finished my first year. I'm walking through the hallways one day, and who do I run into? I run into Georgia.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, so she had finished. I think she had just finished her second year. We're in the same program, but she was a year above, and I hadn't seen her in forever. Right? I probably saw Yanni like a year or two prior, but I hadn't seen her in forever. So we're talking, and she's like, "Oh, you're in the program too," blah blah blah. And then we go separate ways. Summer goes by. I go back to Humber for my final year. Georgia hits me up and she says, "Yo, the company I'm working for is hiring. Do you want to apply?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." I apply to work at this PR firm and I get the job. So I just leave school because I already graduated from uni. I leave school, I finish the program online, and I start working at this PR firm. But because now I'm there in the corporate world, I'm not playing sports anymore. I'm not as active as I used to be. And in my job, I had to watch. I did a lot of stuff with YouTubers and influencers. So I had to watch YouTube pretty much every day. And I was watching Casey Neistat every day.
The best.
And I'm watching this guy every day.
Is that the skateboarder?
No.
Well, he rides a skateboard.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yes, yeah. Rides boosted boards. Not a skateboard. He's a vlogger.
Yeah, he's a vlogger. But anyway.
You thinking of Nija?
Yeah.
Nija.
guy?
Nike guy. Nah. Casey
guy.
Neistat is like probably... He's the guy who pioneered vlogging, I think.
Yeah, he pioneered.
How do we spell it?
Casey and then
You'll
with a
know he
C.
wears glasses always.
C or K?
C.
C-A-S-E-Y.
And then Neistat.
Found them.
Yeah. So long story short, this guy.
This dude pioneered vlogging.
Yeah. So I'll explain why. So this is.
We need to talk about this. I'm watching his vlogs again lately.
Yeah, same. But if you
I met him in New York recently, by the way.
that's sick.
Tell your story. I'll tell
So
you.
if you look objectively, you're like, how does this guy pioneer vlogging? This is how he did it. He used to be a director, like a TV
Him and his
director.
brother.
Him and his brother. They had a show on HBO. So when this guy was doing vlogs as early as I want to say nearly 10 years ago.
Probably, yeah.
He was doing these vlogs, but his vlogs did not look like other people's vlogs. It wasn't just him walking around with a camera. Like, he put so much thought into his editing. Like,
His B-roll was very... he had a lot of B-roll. Like, a lot of
like
B-roll.
it was like
good
cinematic,
music. Like the TikToks today, how they cut to the beat. Like, Casey's one of the early guys who would do that. Like, he'd use very, like, pop, punchy music.
So, but it's largely because he came from a film world, so he's like, fuck it, I'm going to pick up a camera, start doing shit on YouTube. He would do, like, these ridiculous videos where he would get, like, a ticket. He lived in NYC, so we get a ticket for riding his bike, like, in the road or on the sidewalk. But he's like, I can't fucking ride my bike on the bike lane because people are always parking there. And he would get, like, these crazy tickets. So he's like, fuck it. A little closer. So he's like, I'm going to make a whole video about this. And what he did, he would literally just set up tripods in the street, and you would just see him riding his bike in the bike lane, and he would just purposely ride his bike into the back of a car if he was parked in the bike lane. And he's like, this is where they told me to go, kind of thing. And then from that vlog,
that went super viral.
Like viral before viral existed. Like viral back then was it making the news, like traditional media, which is what it did. So I found this guy. I'm watching this shit every day. He was flying drones in his videos, and I'm like, oh fuck, like that's kind of cool. So before I ever picked up a camera, like I picked up a drone. Like I bought a drone and I taught myself how to fly it, and then I started like doing freelance gigs with that, like for real estate and all this stuff. And I just started like posting like these cool little videos back in the day, and it was always a hobby till I started to get paid from it. And then about 2 years working at this PR firm, I had basically pitched to them that I was like, yo, I think we need like a digital media like division kind of thing. I kind of pitched to them this digital media idea before it became like a standardized thing at most of these companies, but they couldn't see the vision, but I also just was not capable of expressing like what was really needed because I was too young. So I ended up leaving the company and I go full-time freelance. Literally, I don't know, half a year later, that same PR firm hires me to do drone work for one of their clients, and they end up paying me, no joke, like almost 70% of my salary that I was being paid when I worked for them.
On one job, one project?
It was one job, and it was like over the course of 2 months. And I was just like, I'm never fucking going back to like corporate world. I was like, I can't do it because like now I've just seen like what's possible. So for all these years, I was like freelancing. Then my career started to change. I wasn't just a drone guy. I started working in film. I started doing all these different things. And then lo and behold, I started like working on commercials. Like my trajectory just changed over the years. And then where I'm at now is, so I'm with Shopify, and I'm like producer and director for them because I just have an in-house creative department, so I shoot commercials for them. But the only reason I took the job is because I was basically gonna get paid, and it was gonna be way more stable and be like benefits, all that shit. That's all great, but it's because I was getting to do the same thing that I was already in love with. Right now, I just got to get to work for like one of the biggest tech companies in the world, and I was like, fuck it, I'll do it. So it kind of, the trajectory of where things started to where they're at now is kind of wild when I look back at it. Because in school, like high school, university, whatever, I never even touched a camera. I wouldn't even think about it. It wasn't even on my radar. Yeah. It just kind of fell into my pocket because of, I guess, Casey Neistat, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, and this is very interesting because the exact same reason I started vlogging was Casey Neistat.
Yeah.
I did it for a very short time, like for my trip when I was
I remember.
You were good though.
Yeah, I remember it.
I don't watch any vlogs. I'd watch yours because I know you. If I didn't know you, I wouldn't have watched. But I watched yours because we're buddies, and I enjoyed.
But they weren't a hard watch. Like it was like
no,
they were.
They were not a hard watch at all.
I could sit there, put it on.
You would
like,
message me sometimes somewhere. You would message me every now and then and be like, "Oh, this one's really cool," whatever. Yeah, I remember that. I never actually considered myself creative, which was stupid. I always thought I was not creative, and I actually used to think my siblings were more creative than me growing up. No offense to them. But I realized as I got older, I'm like, oh damn, I'm actually like I have this in me.
Yeah.
You know, I had a musical background, picked up DJing pretty fast, and then knew how to kind of edit music. And then when I saw Casey Neistat stuff, and I decided to travel, I was like, oh, this would be kind of cool to document this. And I was like, oh, I kind of see how he does it. I feel like a lot of people did end up emulating it, still do. He just had a different way about him, and you know what's the good thing with him was like. Which is the case with most people who become like a household name in something. They do something very unique that hasn't been like really. They have their own take on it, right? So a few people like Jesse. He was cool because like he was similar, but he would put more like cinematic stuff in the middle, right? Yes. Like he would edit. You'd see him put a little bit of like color correction and stuff into his shots, which Casey I don't think does it all. It's more raw. No. Anyways, it was that's why I got into it as well. I kind of there's days where I still miss vlogging and editing and stuff like that. Now that we have this, I don't. But anyways, the point I was bringing this all up and why I talk about Casey is I met him after. So
did the marathon?
Yeah, he did the marathon. So I've actually crossed paths with him. Well, I didn't cross paths with him the first time. My sister actually crossed paths with him in South Africa because he vlogs it. Yeah. So when I was there, when I was traveling the year abroad. in 2017 going to 2018. We were in Cape Town for New Year's with my family. And I had a feeling he was there because I knew he went there during the holidays. And one day, my sister and her husband were going up Table Mountain. We had gone the day before. They were kind of hiking up. I was supposed to go on a hike with them. And she saw Casey Neistat ran by them. He was on a run. I don't recall if she ever said anything to him. But anyways, that were doing the New York City Marathon. Becca and I both ran it. Took us crossed the line after 6 hours. So he went off in the first early waves, and he probably finished it in 3-4 hours, something like that. Wow, this game could get close. We crossed the finish line, and Becca was also really into we're both big into YouTube. She was big into Casey Neistat back in the day. She's like, oh, there's Casey Neistat. And I looked to my left, and he's just sitting there. Sweater on, his glasses, his Ray-Ban glasses with his medal on. And I instantly think to myself, I'm like, I don't like being that person that goes up to people who are famous. Like, hey, can I get a picture with you? But I'm like, this guy had a big influence on just my hobbies and stuff. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go up to him. And I was just hoping, I'm like, I hope he's as nice as he comes across. Yeah. Dude, the same. Like, nice. Yeah.
You got a picture?
Yeah. I have a selfie with it. I posted it on my LinkedIn. I didn't have Instagram at the time. I'm going to post it. I got my Instagram back now. I'll post it. But I went up to him, and I'm like, Casey, I got to tell you something. I was like, I was in Cape Town the same time as you. We were in thing. And what's his thing's name? His wife's name?
Candace.
Candace. Yeah. And I'm like, and Candace looks at me, and her eyes are like, I was like, yeah, crazy. I was like, I was there the same time as you. Casey goes, I thought you looked familiar. I was like, cut the shit. I'm like, you do not.
Love when they do that.
But you know what he's so well media trained. Like, he just knows. But I'm like, I don't want to be a bother. I'm like, do you mind if I get a photo with you? He's like, absolutely. So we take a selfie, and we talk a little bit more. I'm like, man, I'm a really big fan of your stuff. He goes, thanks, man. We were talking about the race, his first marathon, whatever. Yeah. So we made a little small talk. And I could tell that when I was talking to him, Candace, you kind of see that she's like, he probably gets it every day. Right? Probably deep down, it must be annoying after a while. So I started to talk to her a little bit, and I was like, thanks so much didn't mean to bother you, Candace. She goes, no, it's fine, it's all good, whatever. And I just walked away, and I was like, it actually was like really relieving, because sometimes when I would watch, I loved this stuff for the longest time, but then after a while, I was like, it started to feel a little too. He puts it on a little bit. You know what I mean?
For sure.
It's not disingenuous, but it comes across like very dramatic at times, like with his hand stuff and his pauses. But then I met him, I'm like, he's a really nice guy.
It's like confirmation that you can meet some of these people that you look up to, and you're like, thank God you weren't an asshole. Because that's like my worst fear, meeting some people, whether they're athletes or whatever. I was like, please don't be an asshole.
Well, he must get it. He lives in New York. He's back in New York City now. He must get it so Jesus, this game's getting crazy. You must get it so much in the streets everywhere.
Every day.
To be that, after a marathon, of all things, to be that like calm and nice. Like, anyways, super cool.
You brought up a point like about you try to do things, you emulate people and then you reinvent it in a different way. I went back on my IG to look at old photos that I did with the drone. So like, Ricky, for context, like I would
these are crazy.
I would take like these drone photos from above, right? On like a basketball court.
Oh, that's a sick one.
On like just different angles.
I remember when he started doing these things.
This is when I started. Like, if you look at the date, what date does it say there?
July 12, 2017.
Right? So I was doing this for a long time. But those photos you're looking at, you know how I got the inspiration to do it? So even though I got a drone, this is going to blow your mind if you remember this. But do you remember the show Art Attack?
Yeah.
You remember Art Attack?
God, it's me, the head.
It was like a British guy. And
you ever saw Art Attack on TVO?
He would literally like teach kids like how to like make different kinds of arts and crafts bullshit.
Would you assault when you'd make like that?
Okay, so this is what happened, Ricky. For context, on the
this is a sick one.
Yeah. For context,
it's like tennis court.
It's tennis court.
Crazy.
You know this.
Sorry, I know.
Look,
you can kind of tell.
So for
he's not hanging off the balcony.
I know. I can't. So for context, on the show Art Attack, like I said, he would teach kids how to do these different art projects, all this bullshit, right? And he had this one segment on the show. No way. Sorry, I thought they were gonna score.
Oh my, that would have been crazy. Go ahead. Sorry.
He had this one segment on the show where he would have a bunch of random items, and you would just be watching him assemble it in some weird way. So an example, he had the floor was just like black, and he had basically salt in his hand, like a jar of salt. and you would just watch him pour it on the floor, and you're like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And then you would see a bird's eye view, and he basically just drew a portrait of a woman, like a very detailed portrait of a woman on the floor with salt. But you didn't know what it was until you saw a bird's eye view. So I'm watching this show back in 2017 with my nephew at the time, who was like 2 years old, right? And my nephew's watching it, and he's fascinated. And I'm literally sitting there, and I go, holy fuck, I bet I could do something like this with a drone. So then I started taking these top-down photos with a drone, and that's how I got to it.
These are sick.
Right?
That's so creative, man.
Like that's what I used to do. Like that's what people like knew me for back then, and then it allowed me to kind of build up the confidence to start doing other things in film and like creative in the creative world. But that's what I've just learned. Anyone can do this stuff, right? It's just a matter of how much time you put in. Because I do believe that same thing with this podcast stuff. Like most people, a lot of people started to pick up a podcast and do it in the last couple of years, but the challenge is the consistency, like staying with it. And that's where you'll beat a lot of people out, because some people, it's like a flavor of the month, like you said earlier. They'll just do it because it's trendy. But a podcast is only really good if it's consistent. Yeah. That's the only way it's good.
It kind of goes, I don't know his story too much, but like Mr. Beast, there's the famous stories about how that guy just put videos out to put videos out just because he wanted to be someone who's a YouTuber.
Yeah. Are you familiar with this guy?
I just learned about him about 6 months ago.
And technically it's not a podcast. I think they might have one, but a solid YouTube channel, and it's kind of in this, it's kind of like a podcast format, is Colin and Samir. I don't know if you've heard of these guys. They're based out of New York too. This white guy and brown guy, and their whole channel is about interviewing other creators, right? So they ask them the questions like, how much did you get paid for this? How did you go about this? What was your story? Like, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of interesting. They had Mr. Beast on, and Mr. Beast disclosed, like he told people, I didn't know this, but he said all the money that he would get, he would immediately reinvest back into the next video. So if he got paid like 10 grand for a video, he didn't keep any of it. He was like, that 10 grand is now going to be put towards the next video. And you notice this trend of like how his shit just got crazier and crazier as it goes along. It's because he just keeps putting money back into it. And he only just started technically like making money in the last 2 years because of all the other side businesses that he had.
I think if a lot of creators, I think if creators would look at it, I scored another one.
No.
I think if creators looked at themselves the same way a business looks at itself, I think their trajectory and their future earnings, I think, would be greater than what Mr. Beast did. It's like, picture you starting you have a cookie making business, and you start in your kitchen, and then you make a little bit of money for selling to your friends, and then you take that money and you go and buy an industrial dough maker or something.
Yeah.
You move there, and then you add a line, and you add this, and you keep building, and next thing you know, you're fucking making Miss Fields cookies. Like it's and that's not always the case, because also you have to be really good, really on it. Be consistent, because the flavor of the month does change. If you're not on it and at your A game, people will get bored. Like if Casey Neistat started putting out mediocre videos, he wouldn't just stay at the top because he's Casey Neistat. Yeah. You have to still be sharp, right? So
the idea is you get better over time if you just keep doing, you stay at it. But the biggest reason why you want to stay consistent is when someone eventually finds you, or the algorithm catches you, you don't want a situation where basically, I just found the Pals podcast, but they only got 10 episodes out. I'll burn through that 10 in like a week. You know what I mean? It's like you need to stay consistent so that eventually when that new person finds you, they're going to want to go back and just see what's happened. And when they go back, they're going to see a progression, and people like to see that. Yeah. So
they like to get invested in the creator, in their life, almost like who are their friends, who do they stand and talk to, like what I mean. And it also let's think about it. Casey, one of the most famous people on his channel, is this mailman. The UPS driver, what's his name? Marvin?
Marlon, yeah.
Like, that guy's famous.
Yeah.
If I was in New York City and I saw him, I would recognize him. I could tell you what he looks like, which is crazy. It's a guy who delivers
UPS guy.
But it's a nuanced thing about him, and like it's become part of his life. It's like you get a glimpse into it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But on that, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning too. It's like the attention span, right? If you're not putting out enough content where people are consistently following you and like staying on track. Let's say they watch our podcast and like, okay, you know what, we watched our 10 minutes of this. Getting in the car tonight, we watched last week's episode and the one before. Well, I'm not going back a month, and they haven't released anything in a week or two. It's like, okay, well, there's the next person.
Yeah.
It's always like kind of staying top of mind, and then again, the idea of getting better each time too does help, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I was fucking more creative. I fucking wish.
One thing I want to ask you about, are you still boxing at all?
Not as much as I used to, but every now and then.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
So you go to Huffs or?
No, I go to, because of where I live, I go to Bloor Street Fitness because they have the boxing studio up top as well.
Is it the one at Ronci and Dundas?
Yeah, and they have the two giant boxing gloves on the outside.
They filmed a movie there.
Which one?
Southpaw?
No, so you know the movie The Man from Toronto? Kevin Hart?
Yeah.
Woody Harrelson? Okay, so the exterior of the boxing gym is there. The interior is my boxing gym, Kingsway.
Oh, I watched that like not too long ago. I don't go back.
I knew it was there because Woody Harrelson's RV or his like thing was parked outside our office, and the gym's like down the street. So yeah, when you watch it, you can tell, but it's cool because now, like, you know, I've never been somewhere where I've never been somewhere that was a set that I know intimately well. So there's a scene where there's a door, and they kind of it's a fake door. Obviously, they pull it open, and it's a set of stairs that goes up to like the upstairs office of this boxing gym that doesn't exist at Kingsway. So it's cool to see how cinematography, or I guess it'd be cinematography, like stitches these things together seamlessly, because it genuinely looks like it's a wall where they open the door, they pull it, the door opens, and it's a stair set, and he goes up a stair. So like they cut. It's a fight scene that it happens too.
I know the one you're talking about.
It's
now,
crazy.
Yeah.
It actually is crazy what you could do with editing these days. Like, I'll watch a TikTok and I'm like, I know this isn't real, but this is so phenomenal. And this is a TikTok. Like, this is...
The things that... I got thoughts on this. The things that people do in TikTok nowadays, when I first started working in film... Oh, they're going to score again. Oh, no. Terrible. When I first started working in film and, like, getting into editing, there are things that people are posting on TikTok that... used to take forever to do, like on a computer, because people, like I said, people just get better over time. But after working more on sets and being really interested, like I'm really passionate about film, so I watch behind the scenes stuff all the time to see how people do things. And like you said, Ricky, like it's fucked, like what people do, like how smart people are. Because to me, film is just really, we talk about like being creative. It's actually more about problem solving. Like you could come to me right now with like a crazy idea, and I would literally look at my team and just say, how do we make this happen? How do we make that idea happen? Do we got to build like a rig to make this happen? Like, do we do that? And it's kind of crazy the things you see people do. I watched that movie Nope in theaters.
Oh, I haven't seen it
with
yet.
Jordan Peele. It's really good, like really, really good. But like most of the movie takes place at night, right? Because it's kind of like a suspense, like thriller. I come to find out after the movie that basically there's this thing in film called shoot day for night. So basically,
I might have heard.
So
this.
when you want to shoot a night scene, I could be messing up the order, but basically, if you can't shoot at night, what you'll do is you'll shoot it during the day. Actually, no, it's the other way. Sorry. So it'll be nighttime, but you need to shoot a day scene, right? So you just use like crazy lighting to simulate like what the sun is like and all these things. So you won't be looking at the sky, but because of the light, the scene will look like it's outside, right? What they did in this movie is, like I said, the majority of the movie takes place at night, but they shot everything during the day. And you're watching this movie and you're like, how is this possible? Like, how could you shoot? Imagine right now, I'm like, we're going to make this outside look like it's nighttime. How do you do that? They literally built this camera that one camera would be pointed at you, like filming you. They had another camera pointed at the sky that was infrared. So you know when you see like those infrared goggles start black things out, it would do that. So it would look at the sky and it would make it dark. And they had another one pointed at the ground. And literally the editor and the VFX artist, they were able to take that dark footage and put it over the sky. So literally it would look like it was nighttime. And it took some fucking weirdo to just be like, we're gonna
point a camera up, a camera at him,
here,
down.
we're gonna use an infrared, we're gonna do this, and it works. And they like, it's like a multi-million-dollar movie, and it only works because someone had this idea to do this.
Did you ever see the videos online where it's like you see the TikTok and then some editor or someone goes, "Hey, if you want to make this is how it's done." You're like, it's actually so simple when they break it down. I'm like, I watched this video for like 10 minutes trying to figure out how they did it.
Yeah.
And this person shows me how to do it on like Splice.
Yeah.
In 20 minutes.
They tell you how to do it because it's all just problem solving. Like once someone figures it out, then other people figure out ways to
evolve,
make it easier,
and make it better too.
One of the things that I think I don't know if it became your thing, but that I noticed. So after the drone stuff, the one that I remember is that you had this thing that you would shoot video, and I'm guessing it was with the camera, but you would lock onto the object and it would move with it, kind of like the Beats by Dre commercials. Bro. When I saw that, I'm like, I can edit photo, I can edit video, I can do stuff. Wow, man, this game is crazy. I can edit video, but I don't have, I think, the patience to sit and try to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I think if I really wanted to, I could probably sit there and try to do it. But like, I see that, I'm like, see, that to me is on another level. Like, you have a skill that you're trying to find different like things to take in. I think that's so cool. That was one of the cool things you did.
It's funny you bring it up.
You did it with some boxing videos too.
I did it with like everything. It was during the pandemic, and there was not much to do, and I just came up with this series. It was called like the movement series or some shit. And literally I would find people who did different athletic things. Like I found like my friend who's a fucking gymnast and a boxer and a basketball player, and I would shoot these clips. And you might have seen this stuff on TikTok where like they have these edits where someone will be dancing and the camera looks like it's just focused on their head when they're moving. This sounds so narcissistic, but it's like what he's describing, like I did that basically 2 years prior on my IG.
Before it was an effect, before it was a filter.
Like the effect was always a thing, like in film. But I was kind of like one of the first people to start doing it on social media, like especially here. And then TikTok made like an effect for it, which is sick. I'm just like, now this just proves like things evolve over time.
Yeah.
But that was just me trying to figure out how to do new shit. You know?
It was. Oh my god, man, this is crazy. This guy sucks. This game's getting so nuts right now. It was I always found that very, very cool. I guess I want to ask you, like, we've been going for a little while here. What is
we're an hour 40.
Hour 40. We kind of probably should get wrapping up soon. But what holy, this goalie's insane.
That was an unreal story.
Yeah, it was nuts. What is like the next trajectory for you? Like, are you really enjoying what you're doing? Shopify? Is it like, do you have a content angle you want to pursue on your own? You're gonna get into vlogging? Like,
I love what I'm doing on Shopify, even though it's stressful sometimes. I have always dabbled. I've always thought about vlogging. And the only reason why I've thought about it is because I do so many different things that I think that in of itself could be interesting. Like the fact that I, have this corporate job at a tech company that's really creative. I get to travel, I get to film shit. That's cool. But then I also work at somewhere like Barry's. Like it's just weird, all the things that I do. So I've thought about that. I don't know why I've never even tried it. I'm not even taking my own advice of just doing it.
Yeah.
But I really do want to try that. But my big dream is I want to write a TV show. Like I want to eventually put out a TV show. That's what I want to do.
Good for you.
And literally it would be, how do I explain it? It would be like I take inspiration from a lot of shows like Atlanta.
I don't know why. Yeah. I had a feeling that was the first word that was going to come out of your mouth. I literally said it in my head.
So for me, there's shit like Atlanta. There's another show called Insecure. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Seinfeld, like all those kinds. Like, I'm into humor, but I truthfully, like, I don't even care saying it out loud because I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it well. But I want to do basically like a Toronto version of something like Atlanta or any of the other shows I mentioned, because I think Toronto is just so... I've traveled a lot of places, and there's something about this place that I don't think is being captured, like on TV, like in a like a television show. Like, we have so many characters here. We're so fucking diverse, and there's just so many things to do and talk about. Like, I think it could be a fascinating show. So it's definitely something I'm thinking about for sure.
That's very cool. Do you want to write, like, just write, shoot, direct, like, or just?
I want to write and direct it. Okay. That's what I do. So, but I don't have an ego in the sense that I would always partner with people on that. Like, I have an idea of what it needs to be about and how I would do it. But I would I thought this guy was gonna score. But I would I definitely like partner with people to like write this. So.
Oh my god, that was crazy. That's awesome, man. Good for you. Yeah. I think whatever you do is gonna be it'll be cool regardless. Your content that you've put out has always been good to watch. Like, really, really cool to watch and cool to see, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
that's awesome. And then Barry's now you're in there, just started.
Yeah, Barry's is cool. Like, I started working there because when I was traveling for work, I would always go take a Barry's in like, I was in London. I would take Barry's classes there. I haven't taken them in LA yet, but I was like, sick. I like it. I wonder if I start teaching there, could I teach classes in all these other countries? And they said, yeah, you can do that. So it'll be sick. If I go to England, I can just teach a guest class or take classes for free. Yeah, it'd be cool to like build a network that way. Fitness for me has always been a way to keep building a network, and it's pretty cool. So I definitely like it.
I'll come with some of the classes now.
Yeah, let me know.
Well, I even said that today. I was like, should we just do a class? I think it would be a fun way to just jump into the conversation. Right?
Yeah. No, next time you guys want to come, just hit me up. I'll get you in.
Are you right here at Richmond?
Yes, mainly at Richmond.
Oh, so close to it's like a 7-minute walk.
It's easy.
Yeah, not even.
So precise, Rick. 7 minutes.
It actually is. I know that because when I put in the maps, it leads at 7 minutes.
Come on.
I swear to God.
I
swear to God.
I know.
The
theater.
I kind of want to see a movie tonight. I think I might do that.
We have a Christmas party.
Yeah, I'll come for some drinks and then I'll take off. Anyways, man, this was Zamour. This was great, man.
Yeah,
it was a long time coming, but it was a good conversation.
Thank
it was
you.
really fun.
Before we sign off, like, I do have to say, because they have no idea like how we all met. I've known you forever. I knew you through him. But like, I have the funniest memories of like just me being. I was much younger. It's probably when I was like 22, 23, when we would all like used to party at
Lost and Found.
And there's I think there's a photo out there somewhere. I don't know if it's me being held.
It's
who is it?
Viola. He's lying across. He's lying across the legs.
He's lying across, and it's like me, Chris, Rick, and you, and we're all holding him. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah. It's like burnt into my memory somewhere.
I have it on my phone. I think I saw those pictures.
I gotta see this.
That was the last time I saw it. Maybe not the last time I saw you, but one of the last few times I remember. Like,
but it was funny. It was a funny time. Yeah, man.
Yeah, because you said you were coming on. I was like, who is it again? He's like, you remember him? Like what's his Insta? He's like, Top. I was like, nah, I know exactly who that is.
Yeah, because that was back when you used to live down there.
On
right?
King Street. Yeah. I was like King in Bathurst, then moved up to Camden. Now I'm out in Mimico.
Yeah.
Got out of the city, man. I can't do it
anymore. Good days, man.
Ricky loves it down here. All right.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, no. If people want to find out more about you, what's your best way to reach you or connect?
IG, you just hit me up at Topboy, TOPB0Y. That's where you can find me. Yeah.
Check him out. Amazing content.
Honestly, I was literally.
I'm surprised you haven't. I was surprised about boxing. I'm surprised you never ended up doing a fight. You never did a fight, right?
Not in boxing, no.
Why don't you do Fight to End Cancer?
I might do that. I never really thought about it. Might add that to the list.
It's actually one of the funnest. Like boxing's the one thing I don't spar anymore because I don't want to get hit in the head.
Yeah. Right? Isn't it training crazy? Isn't it like
it's a 7-month program. You do 4 days, 4 days a week, I think.
Where?
You train Kingsway in Etobicoke.
Okay. Yeah.
About 4 days a week. I mean, it was a really fun. It's hard, but it's a really fun 7 months, and you get to spar, you get in the ring. It's really cool. Yeah, I miss boxing. I miss hitting pads, all that stuff. I actually, like, over the pandemic, I bought like clitoris pads, a big mitt. Like, I have all of it.
I gotta, you know what? I might look into that, and that might actually force me to start vlogging. I might just be like, hey,
dude,
vlog that whole experience.
If you do and you train there, I'm there pretty regularly. I'll come in and shoot some of it for you too.
Okay, we'll figure.
You
it
let
out.
me know. Anyways, okay.
Nice, guys.
Awesome,
Appreciate
boys.
it.
Signing off, pals.
Peace.
Oh man, that was great.
Thank you.
2 episodes we've done. I've gone long. Yeah, the last 2 we've done with our like friends, and they went like an hour 45, and then the last one almost went 2 hours too. Holy
Man, even like talking about vlogging.